I'm Anil Kumar, and here is a very interesting question on sequences and series. The question is, a person can take one or two steps at a time to reach a particular step. In how many ways can you reach the fifth step? That is the question. Now, how can you do this question? So let us try to do it kind of an experiment wise, and then we'll figure out the logic. So let us say that these are the steps, right? So you say one step, two step, three step, four step, and this is the fifth step we have to reach. We have to figure out how to reach the fifth step. So what I will do is I'll make number of steps and then we'll see the ways. So again I'll make the same steps. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Let us say these are our steps, and now we need to figure out how to reach to the fifth step, right? So what we are saying is, this is step number 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4 and 5. We want to reach to the fifth step. How many ways are there? So let us say that we are starting from the ground. So this is the ground level we are starting from. And what we can do is, we can take either one step or we can take two steps at a time. Now in case we have to reach the first step, how many ways are there? To reach the first step, there is only one way, that is, we can take one step, and so we have one way to reach the step. If we take two steps, then we'll reach on step number 2, right? So there is only one way to reach step number 1. Now in the second case, we will consider how to reach to step number 2, right? So this time we'll see how to reach to step number 2. So we'll go in steps and then understand how many ways are there in which we can reach to 5 steps, right? That is what we are trying to figure out. Now if I am on the ground and I want to reach to step number 2, one way is that I can take 2 steps, right? And reach to step number 2. Second way to reach to step number 2 is from step number 1. If I am on step number 1, then I can take one step to reach there. So there are 2 different ways in which I can reach step number 2, right? So let me write down here. To reach step number 1, I have one way, right? To reach step number 2, I have 2 different ways. Now to reach the third step, how many ways are there? So let's say this is my step number 1, 2 and 3, and I want to reach to the third step. Now you can think like this. Till now what we saw here is that there is one way of reaching step number 1. So let's say step number 1, there is one way. To reach step number 2, there are 2 ways, correct? Now if I want to get to step number 3, I can take 2 steps from step number 1, right? So the number of ways will be 1, the one in which we reach step number 1, right? Correct? So that is 1. Or I could take 1 step from 2. Since to reach 2 steps, we have 2 ways. So there are 3 ways in all to reach step number 3. Do you get the idea? Which you can get by combining 1 and 2. Are you getting the hint? So that is how you can reach step number 3. Now let me show you this in a different way. That is to say that you are starting from the ground, right? One way to reach step number 3 is you just take one step, right? So if I take one step number, okay, let me take another ring. So if I take 1 step at a time, one way is just take one steps. So that is one way of reaching 3. Is it okay? The other way of reaching 3 will be that I first take 1 step and then I take 2 steps. I can reach 3. Is it okay? And another way of reaching 3 will be that I first take 2 steps, right? So I take 2 steps and then 1 step. So these are three different ways of reaching 3. Do you get the idea? So there are these three ways of reaching 3. Now let us consider how to reach step number 4. Now to reach step number 4, we could actually take one step from 3. One step from 3, that means there are three ways of reaching 3. Let me now put these dots back. So there was one way of reaching step number 1, two ways of reaching step number 2, and three ways of reaching step number 3. Now, in how many ways can you reach step number 4? Now, one way is to take one step from 3. That means all these three steps, three ways, will come to that place, right? The other way is you take one leap from 2 to 4. That will bring these two numbers there, right? So the number of ways are 5. Do you get it? So we add the previous 2 to get the number of ways. If you are doing like we showed here, one way when we're talking about is one step, right? And get there. And then we could take one step, two step, and one step. Then we could take two steps. So there are so many combinations. All these combinations combined together will give you how many? Will give you 2 plus 3, 5 combinations. Do you get the point? So here, so in the first case we saw there is one way. In the second case there are two ways to reach step number 2. And in the third case we found there are three ways to reach step number 3. And to reach step number 4 is 3 plus 2. 5 ways. Do you get the point? Now, let us answer the question. Finally, we can reach the fifth step in how many different ways? We have step number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, to reach fifth step, we could go one step from 4 or two steps from 3. We have learned that reaching 3 is in 3 different ways and reaching 4 is in 5 different ways, right? So in how many different ways can you reach 5, the fifth step? Combination of these two, right? That is 3 and 5. Do you see that? So which is 8, right? So here to reach fifth step, it is 3 plus 5, which is 8. So it requires 8 different ways of reaching the fifth step. Do you get the idea? So in this sequence, what we learned that every other step you have to reach, it is combination of following two steps method, right? So the number of steps which you take to reach any step for that matter is sum of ways in which you could reach n minus 1 and n minus 2 steps. Sum of previous two, right? And the series in this fashion progresses. And this kind of series, does it remind you of any series or sequence? It does. It is same as Fibonacci sequence. Do you see that? So this is an excellent example based on that sequence. That is an iterative method in which we get the final result by adding the previous two, right? I hope that helps. Now, as an exercise for you, tell me the number of steps required to reach the 10th step. Well, you need not do like this I have done. It takes time, but now you know the method. The method is for first step it is 1, for two step it is 2, and for every other step it is addition of previous 2, correct? So it is when you add 1 and 2 you get 3, when you add 2 plus 3 you get 5, 5 plus 3, 8, 8 plus 5, 13, and so on, right? So once you add this series in this fashion, applying the formula which I have already given to you, you can figure out how many ways, number of, I should not say number of steps required, number of ways required to reach the 10th step, right? when the condition is that a person can take either one step at a time or a leap of two steps at a time. So that is a very interesting question, and I hope you find it interesting as well. Thank you and all the best.